Praise the Lord, UMBA family. This is the day the Lord has made. Let us rejoice and be glad herein. Hey, we welcome you to our virtual platforms. If you're watching on YouTube, I ask that you subscribe to our channel. If you're watching on Facebook, I ask that you like this post, share this post, let others whose hearts are tender to the work of our association, let them know that we're back for another episode of UMBA Conversations. This is our video podcast series where we have sought to capture an oral history of our great association. In that vein, we heard from our founding moderator, the Reverend Dr. Peter Weary. We've heard from his successor, Reverend Donnie Garris, who ascended to this position in 2016. And then also, too, we heard from our immediate past moderator, the Reverend Dr. Betty J. Irwin. And so we're turning a curve now, and we'll hear tonight from myself. You'll hear a little bit more about me and my context and what brings me to this particular position for such a time as this. And then we'll get the chance to hear from our vice moderators. And we're going to also hear from our auxiliary leaders over the next several weeks. And I'm excited about it. I want you to know that this UMBA is a collective of upwards of 60 churches. We are united, we're together, and all of these churches and auxiliaries are doing what we can to unite churches and transform communities. So again, I'm grateful to have you with us here tonight. Let's go now into the sanctuary for this sit down with myself and Michael Flowers. This is UMBA Conversations. Thank you.
Hello, UMBA family. I am excited to be here today. We are in our first segment in the UMBA Conversations. And we have today with us our moderator, and I'm just really looking forward to having this conversation with him and to be able to bring out some unique attributes of who he is, what he sees, what his vision is, and for you to get a chance to know who he is. So let's just get started. How you doing, my friend?
I'm blessed and highly favored.
All right, all right. Can we put out some virtual hands together for our moderator of the UMBA? All right. So we want to jump right in, and we want to talk about you as a person first. Let's talk about your family. Let's talk about who you are.
Sure. So I am a North Carolinian to the bone. I was born and raised in New Bern, North Carolina. New Bern is the original capital of North Carolina. I am. So a lot of people don't realize that, but New Bern is the original capital of North Carolina. I was born and raised there. Then I graduated high school in 2002, and moved to Durham, North Carolina. Went to North Carolina Central University. Lived in Durham for about 8 years or so. Got 2 degrees while I was there.
What are your degrees?
I have a degree in business with a concentration in marketing. And then I have a degree in mental health counseling. And upon finishing up that degree from NCCU, I got called to my first church, which was the First Baptist Church of Clinton, 900 College Street. There I served for 6 years. So 2010 was a big year for me in terms of that's the year I got called to my first church.
Mm-hmm.
That's the year I got married.
Oh, wow.
That's the year, I started my family and everything. So I started pastoring. They called me the first Sunday in February of 2010, and I got married in March.
Right.
We were already, kind of working on that. So we started life together in Clinton, North Carolina. Yeah.
And in ministry. Wow.
Yep.
Okay.
6 years there.
All right. Great. Well, tell me about your children. You said you have 2?
Yeah. So no, 3. I have
3.
my daughter, Cadence. She's 11 years old. And then I have 2 boys that are 2 and 5 years old.
All right.
Yep.
All right. I know they keep your hands full.
They do. So Cadence, Carson, and Kylan.
All right.
And they, people often ask me, what are your work hours and what's your schedule? And it's whatever I have time with in between chasing them and keep it up with them.
Now, I know this probably has nothing to do with you being moderator, but Tell me something that you just like to do.
Ah, so two cooking methods, and it was during the pandemic. We had a
Okay.
lot of time at home, and I got into two things. One is a cooking method called sous vide. It's a way to make a perfect steak. Sous vide is like a French
Sous vide.
word for underwater or something to that effect. Well, basically, you vacuum seal your meat. For me, it's going to be steak. A lot of times, you put it in water, and then you use a circulator, which gets the water to the exact
Sounds
temperature.
technical, doesn't it?
It gets the temperature of the water exactly where you want it to be. So my temperature is 135 for steak because I like it medium. I can cook it at 135, and you give it time to get the meat to that point. So the joy of it is it'll never burn. So whether you cooked it for 4 hours or 14 hours, it's at that temperature, and it has salt and pepper on it. So once you're ready for it,
So you
it's
don't put Lowry's on it, huh?
you can. It's cooked, but then you have to finish it, and you finish it by searing it or whatever the case may be. So I've mastered the art of cooking steak. I'm
All
quite living
right.
it, and then also to I started smoking meat as well too. So bought a pellet smoker, started watching a bunch of YouTube videos, and it just kind of became my hobby and my habit, and I have the pounds to prove it.
All right. Well, I'm looking forward to the day when I can come by and get one of those steaks. All right. So let's get into your position as moderator. When you think about that, what caused you to even want to engage in such a position?
Excellent. So I love the denomination. I'll start there. I was raised in a holiness church, and when I gave my life to the Lord and joined the church in college, freshman in college, it was a Baptist church.
Hmm.
And I love that pastor, love that church. That's where I was called into ministry and started preaching. And then from there, once I started pastoring, I was 24 years old, you know, young family, and just was looking to be connected to something bigger than myself. And so I found that connectivity, not just in the local association, but in the state convention.
Hmm.
And so, at that time, I was probably the youngest pastor in the state full time. I was probably the youngest pastor in the state when I came into the convention. And I was just so embraced. And again, I just found that connectivity. And, one of the people who I attribute much of the shape of my ministry to is Reverend Dr. Haywood T. Gray.
Hmm.
He's a now blessed memory, but he was the executive secretary treasurer for UMBA. He really, mentored me. I became one of his sons, and he's now blessed memory. But again, I found connectivity in the association, in the state, and so when I came to Charlotte in 2016, I always kind of felt like the association would be something I would want to do, in part because I want to be local in
Mm.
terms of, I mean that, going back to what you asked me about earlier, family. I love the denomination and I love the state convention, but I'm not trying to be driving the length and breadth of North Carolina
Right, right.
every single week. I praise God for our president, Dr. Ricky Banks, and the others who, you know, they're able to do that. But for me, I need to be home at night
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
as much as possible. So, a call to want to be a part of the denomination and support the denomination, but then also wanting to do it locally.
Okay. All right. So you brought up a point about being the younger in the your experiences with the associations away. So now coming into it with us having the UMBA having three moderators, you are the younger of the four in total. What is it that you can bring unique to the association?
Yeah. So, you know what? I think I'm at an interesting juncture in the sense of I've been pastor now for 14 years, and this is my second church. I'm 40. I think that I am old enough to really understand and connect with older pastors, but also to young enough to really understand and connect with the younger pastors. I feel like, the old preachers, the ethos was more so you should just support it because you should.
Right, right,
Like
right.
go to the meetings, do
Absolutely.
all the stuff, because you're supposed to do it.
That's right.
And that is a good enough. And I get that. But I also get the younger pastors who, want to believe in it, want to support it, but need a why.
Mm.
And so I feel like I get both perspectives and hope to be able to, you know, bridge that
Okay.
gap, that chasm. Yeah.
And I think that is important. These, especially in the season of the church, you have to be able to bring those two groups together to be able to be successful in ministry. So, I want to ask you, what are some of your primary goals that you hope to achieve as the moderator?
Yeah. So I've been in this role now for a couple of months, and it's almost like when you get a church.
Right.
There's the church that you thought you were inheriting
Mm-hmm.
and hoping you were inheriting, and then there's the church you discover that you have. And so for me, I I have some thoughts about what I feel like we can do as an association and where I would like to see us go. But sitting in the seat now, I also see that there are some other more pressing concerns that got to be addressed in terms of you have to crawl before you can walk. We have to get, a little bit, better, kind of organized and structured and figuring out the cadence as it pertains to our communication. Them learning me and my style, me learning my constituency and their style. And, once we figure these things out and get a little bit more solidified in that, then we can go forward. Because, I have sense enough to understand, I've been pastor and reader for 8 years.
Mm-hmm.
I've been moderator for 8 days. And so how I'm used to things flowing in the context of my ministry, where I've had time to build it, it's going to be a little bit different with this organization. So there's some things that we will need to put into place. We are building relationship, and it's when things come together, I think we're going to be able to have a tremendous impact.
And what is the statement for the UMBA?
Yes, uniting churches, transforming communities.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
So uniting churches, transforming communities.
Amen.
That's my modus operandi.
Right. So you said something a minute ago about the cadence of the association. We recently, we're pretty much coming out of the pandemic. The pandemic shifted the cadence for churches as well as the association. So with that cadence being changed, how will you be able to adapt to the needs of today's church and community?
Absolutely. So there were some things we discovered about the church coming out the pandemic when it comes to, like you said, like that cadence and that rhythm. One of the implications, I believe, as it relates to the association is not just the hybrid model in terms of there'll be some things that are in person. There'll be some things such as this conversation that's just virtual. And then there'll be some things that are both. But I also believe, and where this is going to impact our association, is that I don't think things can run as long as they used to.
Yeah.
So, for example, we see this in the state convention. Our annual sessions are not as long post-pandemic as they were before. So when I came here in September of 2016, and I want to say we kicked off with the concert on that Sunday, annual session Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and there was a banquet on Friday. And so I don't envision under my leadership having an annual session, run that many days.
Okay.
Matter of fact, we have already released the save the date for our annual session this coming year. We're going to do concert on Sunday, and we're going to do Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. We'll conclude the annual session with the moderator's address and such. So we're going to shorten it some. And should we do a banquet, it would be at a different time.
Right, right.
Because just like in our church, there's only but so much energy that I think we're able to put into efforts at one particular time. And at one point, you got to think about the law of diminishing returns. At what point are we sacrificing excellence in the name of, tradition?
Right. Well,
And
matter of fact, go a
customs.
little deeper with that. I mean, when you start talking about excellence and tradition, and sometimes they can be synonymous.
Yeah.
But go a little deeper with that. Tell me how you believe that the association can continue to emerge into a spirit of excellence, but still honoring tradition at the same time.
That's a good question. I am a big believer in tradition, but it's about how we define tradition. I think what becomes problematic is not tradition, but traditionalism. But tradition matters. This is why we're having UMBA Conversations. This is why, in the coming weeks, we're going to hear from our founding moderator. We're going to hear from Reverend Garris. We're going to hear from Dr. Betty Irwin. And then we're going to hear from current leadership, because you really cannot appreciate where you are without some sense of where it is that you've come from. And so tradition informs our understanding of all this. My problem is traditionalism, and there is an ancient quote.
Because there is a difference.
Yeah, right. Absolutely. And I don't know who to attribute this to, but tradition is the living faith of the dead. Traditionalism is the dead faith of the living.
My. Did y'all catch that? Yeah, that's good.
Yeah, tradition is the living faith of the dead, those who have gone before us. But that, their faith that lives on, but traditionalism is dead faith of the living.
Well, that leads to, since we were talking about those things, it leads to another part of that question. If you think about it, some churches, unfortunately, have declining membership and because of that declining membership, they experience some level of financial strain. And sometimes it has something to do with traditionalism.
Mm-hmm.
So how do you feel that the UMBA can address some of these challenges that these local churches are facing?
Absolutely. So, in 2025, for me, the name of the game is going to be building relationships.
Mm-hmm.
I hope to see every UMBA pastor, and I'm not talking about just at our activities. I'm talking about I'm coming to you. If I can get on your calendar, if I can get on your schedule, I want to visit every UMBA church. I want to visit every UMBA pastor, and I want to see your ministry, and I want to see what are your needs, and I want to see what it is that you're doing. In other spaces, we might call this asset mapping. But what I really believe is when we're talking about uniting churches and transforming communities, so I pastor Reader, you pastor Gethsemane. Even in our, coming together, and you've been to Reader a couple of times, you've seen some things that we're doing, and, you see that maybe we have some answers to some questions you have.
Absolutely.
And if I visit you, maybe you have an answer to a question that some other church is asking. And so for me, that's where this whole uniting churches, transforming communities comes into play, is that we're all up to the same thing here, the same kind of work. And so to
no group is on an island by themselves.
No. So to the extent that we can network, to the extent to where we can listen and learn from one another, we can do some tremendous work. But you got to know your neighbor first before you can really love your neighbor. So for me, it's about learning these churches. And I feel like even as moderator, there'll be some things where maybe I can't get all 60 something churches to buy into this one objective. But, where I can network these 3 churches that are serving a particular community and get them working together, and maybe some churches over here and get them working together, well, we can kind of grow in that regard. Last year, or this year, you and I, your church and my church worked together on an
Yeah.
initiative.
Yeah.
Um, and it was fun.
It was great. It was
it was
wonderful.
the water walk
Mhm.
on partnership with World Vision, raising money for a meaningful cause. Um, getting our health and wellness ministries together. Maybe in 2025 we can make that 5 churches.
Yeah.
Maybe 5 churches can become 15.
Because it's all of us working together,
That's my point. So
collaboration. Hmm.
so if we can get more churches do again, uniting churches, to me, this is what that is. It's not just a a tagline. It's a formula
That's
as
right.
to how we get it done.
That's
Yep.
it. That's it. Well, in the same vein, pastors, like I said, coming out of the pandemic, some are new pastors, some have been pastoring a long time. This is a different dynamic that people are not quite accustomed to. So when you come through those things, what do you think how will the association be able to better minister to the needs of the pastors? A lot of times we're focused on churches and how we can make them more successful, but how can we meet some of those needs that pastors have that a lot of times they don't express?
Absolutely. So I'm focused on the pastors, to be quite frank, because you know, as the pastor goes in a lot of cases, so
Sure.
goes the church.
Yeah.
So I'm really locked in on the pastors, and so building relationships is going to be very important to me. But also, when you ask about association, what the association has to do then is we have to mix it up some. So here's one example of what I'm saying. Each quarter now, we're going to try to have our association meetings. They've always historically and traditionally been on the third Saturday of each month,
Nothing wrong with a little mixing up now.
right?
Mhm.
In each quarter now, we're going to try to have a meeting of the three. One of those meetings will be on a Thursday at 4, because there are some people to where Saturday will never work for them.
Yeah.
There are some people to where Thursday will never work for them. But what I'm looking to do, and as I've had conversations with different pastors, is, there are some pastors, even some of our bivocational pastors, who work on Saturdays, or Saturday is about the only day they have to do their church stuff
Mhm.
because they have 9 to 5s at other times. So as I'm learning this, I'm trying to mix it up some, and diversify, some things. Um, Not all meetings will have to be in person. And then also when it comes to how we're communicating. So I think our association has always done a good job of, auxiliaries kind of put out different reports. But
Mhm.
I'm going to be working hard on the moderator's report, and I'm going to be continue to work hard to communicate with our pastors. So if you missed it, um, the meeting, you'll be able to read what I sent and know everything that's going on. If you're, one that maybe you don't do, you know, email a lot, then we can do some snail mail. I'm basically just trying to figure out who the pastors are and what's going to be the best way to communicate with them. Because what I've discovered about pastors already is that all of us kind of have a different, vibe and style when it comes to how you connect with us and what's best for us. There are some preachers and pastors who they're like, "Look, don't just, don't send me no text message." I'm like,
Yeah.
yes, sir.
Yeah.
Like they want to pick up the phone.
That's right.
So there'll be some preachers who, um, and I'll say this about Frank Watkins. I can say that because he's my son in the ministry.
All right.
So Dr. Frank Watkins is a member of Reader,
Yeah. Yeah.
and so uh, obviously he passed on church. I don't see him here, but Dr. Frank Watkins is going to read everything that Reader puts out when it comes to our electronic bulletins and when it comes to different things. That's how he keeps up with the church. Um, so
Because
I'm mindful of that.
communication is key. That's
Yeah, so I'm mindful of that. Like, so even within, the association, these pastors have different ways of staying up to date with what's going on. And we want to make sure that we are communicating in a way that's going to keep everybody informed to the extent that it's, in our control.
okay. All right. So younger generation, we got generation Z and X, whatever the alphabet, right? but we've had issues where the not necessarily UMBA, but across the country, have a hard time connecting with younger generations. So, what ways do you believe that the UMBA can further engage younger generations to make sure that their needs are being met, and for them to be able to see the love of Christ?
Yeah. So we have a young adult auxiliary, and I hope to have additional conversation with.
Which they have done a pretty good
Absolutely.
job.
So we kind of hope to build on that. But if I could say this, it's going to be hard for the association to do what churches themselves are not necessarily
That's right.
doing.
Yeah.
And so, the association tends to look like a microcosm of the collective churches. And our churches are older, and so are those who comprise our association. So it's a tough question, but I do, again, as we do some asset mapping, I look forward to hearing from some different pastors and seeing what they're doing to build on that demographic within their church. And, in the words of Jeremiah Wright, it's all right to be a copycat, just copy the right cat.
That's right. That's
So,
right.
this is where we see what's working. Hopefully we can bring some of that to the association. It's funny, I almost feel like when it comes to this, I got to think about what works, but what I don't have to think about is what does not work.
Right.
Because being a millennial myself, when it comes to, so again, I think go back to some of our meetings, even as association, and I'm trying to emphasize this as we're gearing up and getting excited about our MLK. It cannot be a 5-hour event. Right?
You're not saying we've experienced that before.
So, we're going to have to, I think some of the services that we are offering and providing are going to need to be a little bit more concise and geared towards people who you're trying to reach, in terms of that person who has, children that they're trying to get into bed, that group where, they got to go to work the next day on the King holiday, right? So you got to think about things like that and do some programming and make sure that how you're doing your programming supports the demographic that you're looking to, participate.
Gotcha. So, in speaking to that,
And when you used to chair the MLK, that's when it was 5 hours.
yeah, that's right. I know. I saw where you was going. I saw where you was going with that. Yeah, it wasn't quite 5 hours, but that's right. That's right. We definitely, because I was tired. I ain't gonna lie, I was tired. But
And I wasn't in here. I'm just talking about what I was told.
yeah. So let's move right along. But in talking about the younger generation and where you believe the direction that UMBA is going in, what role does technology play in reaching the youth and the younger generation, and how it would help the UMBA as an association grow and community?
Yeah. So it's huge.
Because I can see how technology is really blessed readers. So
yeah, so it's huge, and it's something that we're certainly looking to bear, to bring to bear in the association, because what happens is, sometimes we're trying to do, we're trying to do Apple Music streaming, ministry with an 8-track mentality.
yeah,
So we have
some of y'all remember that 8-track, don't you? Yeah.
we kind of got to update some of our stuff, because here it is, many of us, the concentration of our churches are in and around Charlotte. And, on the other side of the pandemic, you can't even get a menu in a restaurant anymore. It's like, scan this QR code.
Yeah.
And so there are a lot of things that people are having to do now that they've gotten accustomed to doing. It's okay to have that some of that technology in the church, and it's not a either or. For me, it's a both and. So, again, I'm thinking about.
So basically, you're looking maybe to have the association to help churches, like a component of to help churches kind of bring up their.
Sure. Yeah. So we want to take advantage of some technology, and then we'll never be. Then we don't want to hide the ball. Then we want to, wherever churches are, to where you're seeing something that's working in a church or in the association, we're more than happy to share with you, how we're doing that. So, what I see the association as in part is a place to share ideas as it relates to best practice. So whether we're talking about, reaching a certain demographic, whether we're talking about
Mm-hmm.
technology, whatever it is, we're all up to the same stuff. I'd love to see the association coming to a place where, you know, there's this pastor here who is trying to figure out how to start doing this. There's this pastor here who's already done it. The association ought to be a space where we kind of unite them and transform communities.
That's right.
Mhm.
That's right. Because you remember we had an opportunity to be able to do a session in General Baptist. Remember?
We did. Yes,
Yeah,
we did.
yeah.
We did. That was fun. That was fun for the
It was
annual session. We talked about technology.
technology
And
because it's not going anywhere. You know,
no,
might as well use it.
no. I'm even thinking that perhaps during the Spring Institute, um, probably this year and going forward, I'm even going to want to add some component of and some conversation around AI and
Mm,
its
yes,
impact on our churches and people.
that's right.
So that'll be an ongoing, conversation.
That is great. That's
Hmm.
great. I'm gonna shift gears a little bit. Shift it a little bit.
Hmm.
So how is the UMBA addressing issues like social justice, disaster relief, or community outreach?
Sure. So, I don't want to be redundant, but for me, the ability to, because we're Baptists, right? So, and what I mean when I say we're Baptists is we're not up under any governing authority.
Mm-hmm.
We are autonomous for better or for worse.
That's right.
Baptist churches can do whatever they basically want to do. So I'm saying this to say, nobody has to participate in the work we're doing. So because we are Baptists, we have to be able to leverage relationships.
Mm-hmm.
We have to, because, churches don't have to fund, participate, support. They choose. So everything for me is about relationships. So more recently, um, we had the Hurricane Helene,
Yeah.
which, devastated different parts of the country, but particularly Western Carolina. And, the work we've done there as an association has been a consequence of relationship. We were fortunate and blessed in that, the Lot Carrier Convention, um, and we do have a vice president in the person of Dr. Robert Charles Scott. They reached out to us because of relationship, and they wanted to know what was happening in Western Carolina, and we shared with them what we were doing, and they sent several checks. At least at that time, they sent $14,000.
Amen.
And we were able to couple that with some of the funds that we've raised, and we were able to go be a blessing and help people, particularly in Western Carolina. But that too was a consequence of relationships, because then it becomes about, well, who do we know in Western Carolina, and who can we trust in
Right.
Western
Right.
Carolina?
Right.
Who's doing the work that we want to hitch our wagon to?
Mm-hmm.
So we had a chance to do that. So that's how that's impacting disaster relief. When it comes to social justice, for me, I don't think it is just some subcomponent of the association.
Yes.
I think it is the work of the
Yes,
association.
sir. Yes,
So what
sir.
I'm seeing us do as we go forward is to develop, if anything, we'll do ad hoc committees that we'll pull together based on what it is particularly that we're trying to tackle. Look, in Charlotte, I think we have everything from health disparities, and particularly the greatest concentration of our churches is in the area where the health disparities are the worst.
Yes.
So, there's that piece of it. There is the political engagement. There is the educational inequalities. So, to me, there are several fronts that the association could and should be working on, and which we will. And so we'll be organizing some ad hoc committees to tackle it based on what it is that we're trying to address. But Lord knows we're not hurting for issues here.
I know.
Everything
Yeah,
from
yeah.
housing and hunger and uh, it's a lot going on. So to me, this is the work of the association. We are an association, not a state convention.
That's yeah, yeah, yeah.
We're an association, not a national convention. So, which is to say, we're local. We're here to address some of the things that are impacting the churches and the communities that we serve. So, we want to be kind of laser focused on particularities when it comes to what are the issues that are impacting our community.
All right. So let's deal with some personal reflections.
Ah,
All right. You um in October you were elected as the moderator, the UMBA.
yeah.
So still being new in the role, what has been the most rewarding part of serving as moderator so far?
Excellent. What's been the most rewarding part is building a team. Because, you know, doing the work of a new moderator is like doing the work of a new pastor. You're building relationships, you're learning people. But in the context of your church, you just have what's in your church.
Yeah.
For me, when it comes to building a team, I have an opportunity to cast this really big net and to tap talent and willing workers from across 60 plus churches. And that is fun and it's
Mm-hmm.
been rewarding. So, building a team, being the moderator has brought me into um, conversation and relationship with pastors who I perhaps did not have previous relationships with. And it's been fun. I don't want to start name calling, but, you know, the UMBA has a lot of really cool down to earth pastors. And
Yes,
I've enjoyed getting to know them. And then also, what's exciting is that, uh, we're in a time of transition. So, you know, I'm here. We have some pastors who are retiring. We have some new pastors who are coming into the city
Mm-hmm.
and coming into the UMBA ecosystem. And they too will be a wonderful
Yes.
new, they too will contribute to this beautiful mosaic that is our association. So that for me has been the most rewarding part so far is just is is connecting with these pastors and building this team.
Hey, man.
Excited about that. Yeah.
That's good stuff.
Mhm.
And you know what? I've seen you doing this work, and I can see the excitement in it.
Now you got to ask me the opposite question.
All right.
What's been the worst?
What's been the worst?
Yeah.
More challenging?
Um, the shadowy side, dealing with the shadowy side of churches.
Mm.
We, as an association, are here as a resource and a support for our constituency. And as moderator, you get to rejoice with them who rejoice, but then also sometimes you have to weep with those who weep. And so, and you know this too, we've been called in, I'll get to give remarks at installation, but I also have to preside at times over fracturing situations in
Yes.
churches too. So dealing with the shadowy side of the Baptist church life in Charlotte has been,
Which can be challenged.
yeah, and it is difficult. It's saddening, right?
Yes, it
I
is.
mean, I think about this in terms of, as a pastor, Frankie Beverly and Mays, right? It's joy and pain, right? So there are things where I love being a pastor and it's fun, it's exciting, and I'm ready to come to work. But then also too, there are, tough moments where you got to do a double funeral. You got to do different things where it's like, man. And such is the case with Moderator. Like there are some, so many things to celebrate and it's fun. United Churches Transforming Communities. But my heart is heavy for churches that are just struggling, churches that are in transition, churches that are, where there's again, the shadowy side to
Yeah.
seeing that as moderator is, it's been challenging for me. Yeah.
All right. We got one more question. One
Yeah.
more. If you can accomplish one thing during your tenure as moderator, what would it be?
So it's tough to say one thing,
I know.
right?
Narrow it down, Reverend.
I want to say, all right, let me zoom out and say one thing, and then if I can come in and be a little bit more specific. I want to be able to hand the next generation or administration of leaders, I want to be able to hand them something that is better than how I found it. I mean, that's my goal for pastoring, is that I want the church to be better when I leave than what it was when I got here. And that's my hope for UMBA.
Amen. I mean, because it's building from one stage to the next.
Absolutely.
Right.
Absolutely.
So when you pass it on, you want to pass it on a little bit better than the one before.
And what I think I'll be able to do more specifically, though, is as it relates to, and that's why we're even doing this conversation, pulling together our data, and having that, a little bit more together, and just kind of putting some things in place that will outlast me and be a blessing to moderators who come after me. Just like in the case of previous moderators, there are some things that they started, some things that they did that perhaps they didn't complete, but it's because I've been able to, what they did have made things better for me. So I hope that what I do will make things better for the next generation.
All right.
The next leadership.
All right.
Yep.
Well, guys, this is Michael Flowers and the moderator, the Reverend Dr. Thomas Farrow. Join us next month as we continue our second segment of the UMBA Conversations. Remember, we're united churches and transforming communities.
Amen. Peace out.